Live.
Good morning, everybody. On this lovely Thursday morning, it is very nice in Johannesburg today. So we've got nice, lovely weather. I'm sorry for those of you who are in Cape Town, apparently where it's freezing, but we are well on our way to spring. So welcome to all of you. I would like to welcome today's guest, Michelle Moss. She has agreed to come and talk to us about a very, very relevant topic that is, I think we need to be discussing and unpacking more and more as from now to for a while, and it's about team building, looking at purpose, resilience, diversity, as well as in the context of what we've been through. And as Michelle was saying a bit earlier, where are we in this pandemic? Is it finished? Are we mid? Where are we? So those are areas that we need to perhaps unpack and think about. So just a short introduction from me about Michelle. And she is a founding member and shareholder of Talent Africa, which is now Signium Africa. She heads up the leadership consulting and assessment services practice for Signium. And she has worked on numerous other small and large-scale talent management projects. And her clients have been in both the public sector and private sector for the last 18 years. So Michelle has got a lot of experience in this. She has also had experience in public relations, transport, and financial services. So the ranges of industries that you've worked in, Michelle, are really, it's interesting, and I'm sure it must be, to cross over from public relations to transport and finance is very interesting. She holds a Bachelor of Arts from BITS and then a master's degree in industrial and organizational psychology. And she did really well because it's cum laude, and this is from the University of South Africa. So we are really privileged to have you with us today, Michelle. We really are looking forward to a great discussion. Please, everybody, if you've got questions, ask questions. And I know that we are going to enjoy this time together. So thank you so much. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Jane, and thank you for inviting me to come and talk and share a little bit of experience today. I really feel honored, so thank you for that. I'm going to share my screen so that I can take you through a couple of the slides that I've prepared. So if you just give me a minute to do that. Okay. You should be able to see it by now. All right, so as Jane has already said, we're going to be talking a little bit about team building, about purpose, resilience, and diversity. But first, I wanted to give you more of my real bio. So, Jane, you were talking about me being in the transport and the financial services industry just after I had graduated from WITS with a degree in English literature and English language. The job that I had set up suddenly fell apart and the company went bankrupt. And I found myself working for a machine moving and rigging company. And I cried every day. I think for the first few years of my career, I was a professional crybaby because these trucks were older than me and they would break down and they would get stuck in traffic. And it didn't matter how much I planned, things always went wrong. But I learned how to roll with the punches. I learned how to make another plan. And in the end, I had some fun. And then I moved into property management, and I don't know how it happened. To this day, I don't know how it happened, but it landed up being my job to phone all the delinquent tenants that hadn't paid their rent. And again, I cried and cried because now I had to be mean, I had to be tough, I had to threaten, and I had to get that money in. And so it was terrible. I cried and cried, but eventually I learned to manage conflict. I didn't have to break any kneecaps. And then I found industrial psychology. So I've been in the executive search and leadership consulting world for 22 years now, and I love it. So I've stopped crying, and I'm one of the lucky ones that really still enjoys my job. We do assessments at individual, team, and organizational level. And we found over the last 2.5 years, with the start and the middle of the pandemic, that there's been a very significant increase in our clients asking us for help with their team building. I think the impact of the global pandemic has significantly affected individuals, and leaders recognize the need to intervene to try and mitigate those risks and to do something sooner rather than later. So I thought today that I would share with you some of the most common problems that we've helped to address with the team building exercises, and maybe to try and normalize a little bit of the pain or a little bit of the issues that you also may have experienced over the last few years, because everyone went through it and we were all in it together. But first, let's do an assessment, because I just can't help myself. It's one of my most favorite things to do. So you do have access to the poll, and I want you to evaluate your team. I want you to think about the team that you're in either at the moment or the team that you were in during the pandemic. And I want you to think, which of these donuts would your team choose? You can only choose one of them, so don't be greedy. But would your team choose a plain glazed donut, a chocoholic with loads of chocolate on it, Sprinkle City that is bright and beautiful with all the sprinkles, or would your team prefer a jam fancy? Can you do the poll now? Jane, do we get to see the results now or only a bit later?
I keep switching myself off. Have you got at the bottom of your screen, can you see the polls there?
Let me have a look. I'm just going to have a look and see. Sorry, guys, just give me a minute.
I hope you're all voting, because from what I'm seeing here, not too many people are voting. Oh, we've got 12%, we've got 25%. Oh, no, people are doing their thing. Aha.
Okay.
You see that?
I can see it.
Great.
Very interesting. Quite an even split there. All right, let me show you what this means, because now remember, this is an important assessment that you've just done on your team. So if your team chose the plain glazed, then it means that your team are mostly simpletons, you prefer living on the safer side of life, and you're most probably sticklers for routine. Other teams or other people might describe your team as predictable, plain, or just a little bit ho-hum. So think about that. If you chose the chocoholic donut, then it means that your team has a taste for the finer things in life. The richer the better is probably your favorite motto, and you might be described as haughty, sassy, or kind of hoity-toity. If we look at the next one for Sprinkle City, then your team probably love anything that's over the top. You love being the life and soul of the party, and you might be known as attention seekers. Other teams might describe you guys as lively, boisterous, flippant, or egotistical. So let's have a look at the next donut. Maybe it gets better. The jam fancy means that you guys are risk takers who dare to spill jam down the front of your shirts. You like to live on the wild side, and you may be described as daring, ambitious, adventurous, or thrill-seeking. So from what I could see in the poll, and it might have changed a little bit, there seemed to be quite an even spread between the ho-hum, plain glazed, and the chocoholic who like the finer things in life. So this was just for fun. I hope that you never get a questionnaire or an assessment like this if you're doing a team building activity. The only time you should see donuts is if you're actually eating them and enjoying them during your tea time. So there's plenty of other really great assessments that we use when we do team building. Really more around Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram. There's so many other much better, reliable, scientific, valid options to use. But that was just for a bit of fun, just to get us into the mood. So let's jump right into it. I think today, if we can have a look, just get a view of the past, the present, and the future of team building. So what was team building like pre-pandemic? What are some of the trends that we've picked up in the work that we've done in the last 2 years? And then also let's try and glimpse a little bit into the future and see what team building will look like in the next couple of years. We all know John Maxwell, who said that teamwork makes the dream work. There's so many reasons why teamwork is important. So whether it's better quality decisions, whether it's opportunities for individual learning and growth, whether it's to improve the morale in your organization or improved efficiency, there's loads of research and there's a lot of business case information for the need for team building. So or teamwork. So we're not even debating that today. Having a look at the past. So because this is Women's Month, I'm going to use some images of shoes quite a lot as we look at the past, the present, and the future, because really, what woman doesn't love a pair of shoes? And here's a nice pair of old-fashioned shoes. And really what team building often looked like pre-pandemic was something like this. It was a little bit awkward. It was a little bit uncomfortable. It was an introvert's worst nightmare, and often had to do with how physically strong you were or how competitive you were and how sporty you were. So really, team building wasn't always as effective as it could have been, and it often landed up looking something like this. So what I really like in this picture is how the women seem to be winning here. There's no winning and losing when it comes to conflict, but there's even one lady there who looks like she's having great fun beating up two of her team members. So this is what we want to avoid. We don't want the pre-pandemic type of team building, because all of a sudden COVID hit and team building got serious. So the pandemic affected everyone in many different ways, whether it was physically, emotionally, mentally, economically. We had to become teachers, whether it was teachers of our team or teachers of ourselves. We had to become teachers of our kids, online learning. We had to be flexible. There were so many changes that happened all at once, both in our personal and in our private lives. And as I said, team building got serious. So all of a sudden, we had to look at why we were doing team building. What were the issues that were coming up? What were the problems that teams were experiencing that they needed help with? It was very different to pre-pandemic, where it was really just about a bit of fun and maybe a bit of mud to make it more adventurous. We also looked at how team building had to change. We couldn't wait for the pandemic to be over. We couldn't wait until we no longer needed to do social distancing. And so our team building suddenly had to become online. It had to be more inclusive. It had to be more virtual. And just to give you an example, at Signium, we like to practice what we preach. And we're a global organization with offices in 40 countries around the world. And we had a virtual wine tasting event with every office around the world. We had 3 women winemakers that mailed their bottles of wine to us, to all of the offices. And we sat and they took us through how they had made the wine. They took us through the tasting as you would normally do a wine tasting. And then for a bit of networking, we were thrown into separate breakaway rooms. It felt a little bit like speed dating. And it was always exciting to see who was going to be the next country that would land up in the room with us. So even though we were around the whole world, we were actually more together that afternoon than we'd been in a very long time. So there's always a time and a space for wine. I want to also just refer us now to to one of the other polls. This is a bit more serious. This isn't about donuts. But what are the frustrations that you are either experiencing now or that you have experienced with your team? Is it short-term thinking? Is it problem solving, communication, poor emotional intelligence, diversity, trust issues, team relationship, unclear roles? Maybe all of them could be frustrations. I've asked you in the poll just to choose 2 of those. So I'm going to quickly have a look and see what those results look like. Let me see. Okay, on my side, I can see that short-term thinking, about 30% have said that that's been a problem or a frustration with teams. Problem solving, about 9%. Communication, 27%. That's already quite high. Diversity, that hasn't been as yet. I don't see any results there. Lack of trust, I don't see any results there yet. Team relationships, about 8%, and unclear roles, about 16.7%. Okay, I'll give you a few more minutes to vote if you still want to. But these are some of the most common problems, or these are some of the most, the biggest issues that have come up in our experience over the last 2 years. Okay, we can check in a little bit later. But what you see in that list is it's a mix of behaviors, it's a mix of attitudes, it's a mix of skills and competencies. And that's what makes team building quite frustrating, is what exactly are we focusing on? What exactly are the issues? So let me close the poll here. Please continue to vote if you haven't yet. We can always come back and have a look at the results. All right. So let me share some of the trends. There's three main trends that I'm going to share with you today. And the trends are still a little bit complicated. They're still a little bit uncomfortable. So we have no perfect solution to team building compared to, that pre-pandemic that I showed you. Again, I'm carrying on with the analogy of the shoes. And this is an image from Paris Fashion Week. It was this year, spring 2022. And this type of shoe was voted as one of the most popular shoes. I really don't know why someone would want to walk around with a broken egg, or what looks like a broken egg at the bottom of their heel, or a bottle of nail polish. But anyway, these are the trends. I'm not a fashionista, but really it's still, team building is still a bit complicated and still a little bit uncomfortable. So one of the things that we've had to look at quite often is the purpose. So with all of the upheaval and with all of the changes that the pandemic brought about, we found that teams weren't sure why they still existed. They weren't sure what their purpose was. And as Kimber Lockhart puts it perfectly, a sense of purpose is a deep understanding of the reasons behind our efforts and a desire to pour in time and energy because that purpose resonates with the impact that we would like to make in the world. So as a team, purpose is really important. When your purpose is clear, when your team members are aligned, that's where you find magic in your team. When you have that alignment, you find that your work is invigorating, it's satisfying, it's engaging. And if you're not sure in your team what the why is anymore, why are you still in existence, have a look at some of the work that Simon Sinek has done. He speaks about starting with the why. He talks about how that brings clarity, meaning, and direction, and how that becomes a filter for every decision that we make on a day-to-day basis. So looking at the purpose, looking at the why became very important. We did a team workshop with a team that had been on life support for a couple of years before the pandemic. And all of a sudden, they were the hottest property, they were in demand, and they literally went from zeros to heroes. And they realized that their values needed to change. So we helped them to get a better understanding of who they are and what their values are. And it was important that each one had to understand their own values as well. They had to go on their own hero's journey to understand themselves as individuals, and then how do they contribute to the team. So now I would like you just to do a little bit of quiet reflection. I would like you to think about what is your team's purpose. So this isn't a full team building workshop, but just cast your mind back. What would your company miss or what would your company miss if your team wasn't in it? What does your team stand for? And what does your team do that's better than any other team? Think about what changed for you during the pandemic, or even at this stage of the pandemic. What worked for your team? What didn't work? How can you make those adjustments? Do you need to reset your vision or your values? What are the unspoken rules in your team now compared to what they used to be? Do you come late? Are you less professional? Are you interacting more? What are those unspoken rules that govern the way that we do things? And do you trust each other? So even in the poll that we've just done now, although trust was very low on the list, we found that it was quite important during the pandemic, and it was an issue that we addressed a lot in our team building activities. So just like it's really virtually impossible to walk in a pair of broken heels, it's very important for a team to be effective if there's no trust. We know that during the pandemic, teams asked us to help them to rebuild social bonds. The dynamics had changed. We know that a breakdown in trust can threaten productivity. It creates quite a toxic culture, and it can demotivate team members, which ultimately affects the bottom line of your business. So as fun as it looks to see a pair of broken heels, it really can impact the bottom line of the organization if the trust is not in place the way that it should be. Ron Friedman wrote an article in the Harvard Business Review in October 2021, where he spoke about the need for creating opportunities to develop genuine, authentic relationships. And that is a way to make your team members healthier, happier, and more productive. When we talk about bringing your authentic self to work, and we put the lens of emotions there, what we mean is bringing both the positive and the negative emotions. I don't like to use the word negative, but we'll do it just for today. The positive emotions, we found that effective teams will, from a positive point of view, they will compliment each other, they will joke, they will tease each other, they use emojis and some of the language or some of the written communication or gifts. But those teams that were especially effective brought the darker side as well. So they were quite comfortable to curse or to complain or to express sarcasm. So they didn't try and suppress the negative emotions. They were quite honest and authentic about how they were feeling and what they were going through at the time. You can't suppress just the bad emotions and put the high emotions on, like you would with a control board, put the high emotions on superpower. Generally, if you are suppressing your anger or your frustration, your joy and your passion and your excitement for life is going to be suppressed as well. So you can't just flip your emotions on and off and just take the good ones and leave the uncomfortable ones behind. So we know that trust is not something that can be engineered. It's not something that you can buy off the shelf. It's something that is emotion bound, and it is something that is earned over time. It's also really critical to developing good relationships with the people in your team or the people around you. So as much as trust sounds a little bit touchy-feely, it's actually something that's really important for the effectiveness of your team. And of course, any Women's Month presentation wouldn't be the same if we didn't include something from Brené Brown. And she said, a deep sense of love and belonging is an irreducible need for all people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, to be loved, and to belong. When those needs are not met, we don't function as we were meant to. We break, we fall apart, we numb, we ache, we hurt others, we get sick. And it's not saying that we need to fall in love with every single member that is in our team, but we do need to foster that sense of belonging. We do need to foster that sense of a common goal and a common purpose and building trust with every interaction that we have. Do you connect with yourself? Do you connect with your team? Do you trust yourself? Do you trust your team? What is the mental health of your team right now? As Brené said, we ache, we hurt others, we get sick. And so mental health became quite an important area for us to also deal with when we did our team building exercises. I'm going to play a video for now. I hope that you'll be able to hear it and that it plays well. But it's an advert for breakfast in a bottle, and I'm not advocating that we need to drink our breakfast, but there's some interesting stats that come out of this video. So let's have a look. I'm going to play.
Like most women in commercials, I love to start each day doing yoga in my underwear.
Or journaling in my journaling nook.
And eating a wholesome, farm-fresh breakfast with a tiny spoon that I bought from a company that gives tiny spoons to underprivileged children.
Huh. According to science, most professional women don't have time for any of that.
Not that we need research to prove it, but there's research to prove it.
57% of us are up before the sun is up.
21% of us check our work email before even getting out of bed.
What?
Let's go get that morning meeting.
9% of women cite dry shampoo as one of the greatest inventions of the 20th century.
I'm done.
33% of us never make our bed. Like, ever.
21% of us have used an article of clothing to camouflage a stain. Very nice.
Only 16% of women would describe their morning with the hashtag blessed. And that seems kind of high.
58% of women will swear at someone or something this morning. Oh,
You know what 100% of us do have time for? A real life Pinterest board?
Fermenting your own small batch kombucha?
Propose?
No, an organic breakfast in a bottle.
That's why we created Organic Balance,
Propose.
a nutritious organic breakfast with 16 grams of protein and half the day's calcium, so you can seize the cray. Find out what real women's mornings are really like at realmorningreport.com.
So I'm sure that some of you can relate to that you understand the stress and the chaos and the panic of just getting to work. We know that the World Health Organization had said that work is good for mental health, and that It is something that encourages us, it's something that motivates us. But if we are working in a negative work environment, it can lead to physical and mental health problems. The economic impact at the moment of depression and anxiety is significant. The World Health Organization have estimated the cost to the economy at $1 trillion a year in lost productivity. We really need to make sure that our mental health and that we're managing anxiety and depression of ourselves and our team as best we can, not only for the bottom line, but also because it is the best for us. Burnout is something that is on the increase as well. McKinsey did a survey in September 2021, and in that survey it showed that that more women were burnt out in 2021 than they were in 2020. So that was something that was quite interesting. And also what their survey showed is that more women were feeling burnt out than men. So we're not going into the gender debate, we're not touching that, but having just watched that video, perhaps you can understand why burnout during a normal time would be so high, and then put the layer of the pandemic on top of that, and you can just imagine how those numbers would be off the charts. So has anything changed for you? Is it still true for you and for your team? It can be quite daunting talking about mental health. It is really a very broad field, and a lot of managers are very uncomfortable talking about it. They don't know what to do, and so they've reached out to us for help. They know that it's a problem, and they know that they need to do something about it without being intrusive or without interfering too much in their team members' lives. So one of the responses to stress and to burnout is to create an environment of psychological safety in your team. So that's being able to show yourself without fear of negative consequences, without damaging your self-image, your status, or your career. So once again, we go back to bringing your authentic self to work and being able to trust yourself and your team members. When you have a culture of psychological safety, it becomes ingrained, not only in the culture of your team, but the culture of the organization. It becomes a place of acceptance and a place of realistic expectations. We had a client that asked us to do team building with their brand new graduates. So normally they wouldn't have invested money in such a lower level team, but they felt that it was really important that they found a way to connect with each other, that they found a way to belong to each other. We did a great team charter with them. They made up a team name, and it's really helped them 6 months on in their journey to be as successful as they can, even at a graduate level. We know in a world that demands agility and the ability to switch tasks so quickly that resilience became another factor that was really important for team building. Let me just jump on. That was the stats on the World Health Organization. So resilience is an ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or to change. And we've had a lot of misfortune and change over the last 2 years of the pandemic. So everybody needed to be resilient, whether you were a little kid that was starting grade 1, or whether you were someone that had been looking forward to your retirement and was now stuck at home and couldn't go anywhere. Elaine Pouliot speaks about resilience very nicely. She says that there are 3 coping mechanisms that an organization and a team need to have to operate efficiently or effectively: adaptability, resilience, and agility. And to be successful, the integrated cross-functional teams that make success happen need to operate within an organizational climate that is characterized by those values of adaptability, resilience, and agility. These include, here are our words again, authenticity, trust, flexibility, empowerment, collaboration, characteristics that are essential for teams to successfully manage disruptive, fast-paced change. And that's what we've all been experiencing for the last few years. Dan Siegel coined the phrase, name it to tame it. And psychologist David Rock said that when you experience significant internal tension and anxiety, you can reduce that stress by up to 50%. By simply noticing that emotion and being able to name your state. So most people can say they feel mad, bad, sad, or glad. But if you have a look at this table here, that's Susan David, who's a South African psychologist on staff at Harvard. It's a table that she's put together. Look how many describing words or how many emotions there actually are. If your team can say that they feel so pathetic or they feel confused, if they say that they feel paralyzed rather than just being an ineffective team, it helps to pinpoint what exactly are the problems and how do we address those problems. How do we manage those emotions rather than having the emotions manage us, and then everything just deteriorates into a dysfunctional team. If we can say that we're jealous, or if we can say that we're impatient, it makes such a difference to the effectiveness of the team. I'm going to do a little exercise on mental health with all of you now. So I need you to please lean forward, lean close to your computer screen, look intensely at the next slide. So go right forward, concentrate, don't lose focus, and here it is. Big snake in your face. I hope you got a fright. What happened when you saw that snake? For those of you that are scared of snakes, I'm sorry if I violated your trust. Did you feel any reaction in your body? Did you get a little bit of a shock? What do you think happened in your brain? What do you think happens to relationships when someone violates your trust or when you get a big fright? So you might be really scared of snakes and you respond physically to that. What happens if you're really scared of your boss, or you're really scared of a task that you don't know how to do and you don't want to ask how to do it? How does that affect your team? I'm going to talk a little bit about neuropsychology now, because this is something that became really important during the last 2 years of COVID. We found that being able to explain what people were going through from a physical, a biological, a scientific level seemed to land a lot easier than talking about touchy-feely things like resilience and trust. So this is a little diagram of the brain. I'm sure a lot of you know that you can even use your hand as a good example of what the brain looks like, with your prefrontal cortex being here. You open it up and inside sits this little tiny thing called the amygdala. Here is the amygdala here in the drawing. The amygdala is a little almond-shaped structure. It's part of the limbic system, and it's the alarm center. It's the alarm center of your brain. So it is alerted through your senses, what you see, what you taste, what you hear, what you feel, what you smell. So even social media, that might be something that you're hearing or that you're reading and you see, and that alerts your alarm system. So your amygdala protects us from danger and it helps to keep us safe. When something threatens our safety, the amygdala will immediately tell the body to go into flight, fight, or freeze mode. Normally, the prefrontal cortex is the boss. That's the one that's in charge. That helps us to make rational decisions. That helps us to think clearly and to reason things through. But when your body goes into the state of protection, the amygdala is the one that's in control. And the amygdala has a loud voice. The amygdala is screaming that this is a state of disaster and all other instructions, all operations just cease. So if you see that snake, you're walking in the road and you see that snake, you're either going to fight that snake, you're going to run away from it, or you're going to freeze. But you're not thinking about how hungry you are and how you can't wait to have your lunch. You're not thinking about the vacation that you're going to have in a couple of weeks' time. All you focused on is that crisis, that state of disaster. And this is known as the amygdala hijack. Now, what is so interesting is that the amygdala is supposed to just be our warning system if you see a snake or if you've got to run away from a tiger. It's not supposed to be activated, and your alarm is not supposed to be ringing and ringing for the past 2 years as it has for most of us. We've all been in a state of disaster. We don't know what about our safety, about that of our teams, our families, our friends. We've had to make so many adjustments. Our brain has been, or the amygdala has been screaming this alarm for the last two years, if not longer than that. And it's had some detrimental effects, and we need to understand that when we look at building the team. I'm going to show you on the next slide here what happens to the body when you're in that state of an amygdala hijack. So your body goes into survival mode. It's flooded with numerous hormones to help avert that danger. Your sympathetic nervous system is activated, and you get the following physical and psychological responses. Your heart rate rises rapidly, so you might find yourself sitting in a meeting and it seems like for no reason, but suddenly your heart is pounding. Your blood pressure increases, and that's to ensure that there's more oxygen-rich blood that is going to the muscles so that you can run away. But you can't always run away out of a Teams meeting or out of a Zoom meeting. So you sit there with all of this energy and all of this happening in your body, but you can't run away from the snake. There's nowhere for you to go. Your immune and your digestive systems are put on hold. They're not critical, and so they're just sidelined. This is to go into energy saving mode. Your muscles tighten. So if you're worried, or if you don't understand why you've got such a sore neck and such a sore back and why your hips are aching like an 80-year-old, it's because your muscles have tightened. You're preparing to fight, but you can't punch that screen. You don't have that physical release that you would if you were trying to kill a snake. Your mind starts to race. You can't think clearly. You can't think creatively. You can't make good decisions. You probably can't sleep either because your mind is so busy. It's just racing all the time. Your focus is on detecting danger to ensure your survival, and you might even find that the intense and that long-term experience of fear leads to heightened irritability, heightened frustration, anger, all of those things. They end up being triggered quite quickly. You might find yourself losing your cool, but not even knowing it was a small trigger and you overreacted compared to what happened. But it is because of all of these years of living with the amygdala hijack. So this is something that that really was quite important. I think that neuropsychology is going to continue to be important. It's something that we should all understand. You don't need to be a psychologist. You don't need to be a biologist, but it really helps you to understand the dynamics in your team and what is happening when all of you are in a time of crisis, or just one or two of you are in a time of crisis. One of the other trends that I want to talk about quickly is diversity. So we've heard about diversity in so many shapes and forms. We know that diversity can be your viewpoint, it can be your diversity of experience coming together in a team, your problem-solving approach, your personality, even just different generations can cause quite a bit of diversity with 4 generations in the workplace at the moment. And of course, diversity of location. If your team is sitting, whether it's in South Africa, whether it's, you know, the other side of the world in Cape Town, or in Pretoria, or in Italy or New Zealand, we all sit in a diverse location. And we know that as much as there are so many benefits to diversity, there's also the downside, one of them being conflict. So we did a team building exercise with a lady who was really becoming quite toxic, and she had completely disengaged. And during the session, we were able to dig down into what exactly was going on. And you won't believe it, but she was actually so offended with her team because they hadn't phoned to wish her a happy birthday. It had been her birthday. She was, so this had happened a couple of times, but just before the pandemic, she'd been traveling quite a bit. It was her 40th birthday. She was sitting in transit at Heathrow, and she felt like she'd given up something, her family time, her own birthday celebration time with her friends, to be on an assignment for work. She was sitting at the airport and not one person phoned her to wish her a happy birthday. So it seems ridiculous, right? I mean, how pathetic. But actually it's not. It was so important to her that she just needed that acknowledgement. She just needed to be recognized by her team. And really, how cost effective is it? How easy is it to just put a notice in your diary, an annual reminder, phone her on her birthday? It's much cheaper than trying to diffuse the toxic environment, trying to re-engage her, or losing her talent to that team altogether because she's left and gone to another organization. But if you don't know how to talk about conflict, she didn't know how to say, guys, I'm so offended you never said happy birthday. And so what we do during team building is we help teams to face that conflict and to talk through it, not to avoid it. I love what Adam Grant says. He says that we should agree to disagree more often. Avoiding minor arguments is a missed opportunity for learning. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's about how do we learn from the situation. He says it takes practice to manage emotions, to maintain respect, and to rethink options. The best way to prepare for big debates is to train with the small ones. So that's one aspect that is always important, is the handling that conflict in teams, the conflict that comes with diversity. Another one is diversity of thought. So I don't know if any of you know the Hot Wheels case study. So in 2016, they were they were about 2 years away from their 50th anniversary. Any of you growing up would probably have had a couple of Hot Wheels in your pocket. I think at 40 years old, my brother still has a few in his desk drawer at work. And I'm sure when he's stressed, that's one of the ways that he manages his stress. But what they did is they had a focus group with a couple of kids, and they saw how kids play differently these days. There was one 8-year-old boy that was busy with the play set, and he said, how boring is this? All the car does is go down the ramp, and it does nothing more than that. And then he said, imagine doing this for an hour. Like, it was a torture for him to have to play with these little cars for an hour. You know, like, oh, imagine doing your homework for an hour. And that gave the executives quite a big shock. They realized that kids wanted mixed play. And so they created a whole new team. It was people in the organization, but it was a brand new team that would try and find a way for Hot Wheels to still stay relevant, but in a way that the kids would enjoy and that they could play with. So they set about inventing a smart car, a Hot Wheels smart car. They put a little program thing, a little disc in the bottom of the car, and they were able to go online. There was an app that they could buy with the car. They were able to race each other. They could see who had done the fastest lap or who had the most difficult turns. And it was much more engaging and much more progressive compared to the Hot Wheels of before. If you talk to the commercial team, they will tell you that actually this project wasn't successful. If you talk to some of the design officers and the global marketing VP, they will tell you that this project was incredibly successful because it created a new culture for Mattel, who's the toy company that make Hot Wheels. They suddenly had a culture of yes rather than a culture of no. So even though financially it didn't pay off the way that they wanted it to, they understood how to put teams together better. They understood how to explore and how to not be scared, how to think differently. And that's a really it's a really nice case study. If you want to have a look at it a little bit more, you will see there's a podcast called Teamistry, and they talk through this case study. What they also spoke about is how each person is able to more comfortably draw on their strengths rather than work on their development areas during a time of crisis. They had only 2 years to reinvent this toy before their 50th birthday. And so they built a team on the strengths of the individuals rather than on their position profile or their job title. And from that point of view, it was a different way of designing a team or putting a team together. I want to also quickly talk about diversity in collaboration that is important when it comes to diversity. So the Harvard Business Review did a study, and they published that in July 2020. They had collected a decade's worth of data on collaboration and financial performance, particularly in a time of crisis. So this was relevant for us now, looking back at this during the time of the pandemic. They found that there were very different collaboration patterns that had emerged. And here's an example of a law firm where they found that the partners that collaborated by far outperformed the partners that did not collaborate during the crisis. What was also very interesting is those that had collaborated, they were actually able to increase their revenue or increase their billings quite quickly after the crisis had passed. Those that did not collaborate, it took more than 5 years for them to recover. And what the difference was is those partners that decided to collaborate, they expanded their network across functional and industry silos. They increased the number of colleagues that they worked with. They were willing to pitch in on other people's projects. They talked about the crisis. They talked about the pressures that came with the crisis. And they were able to team up and to identify new opportunities together, even if it meant less personal glory for working on their own project or working on their own clients. Those that did not collaborate, they kind of put walls around their projects. They pushed their colleagues away. They really held their interests quite closely to themselves or hoarded their work. And as a result of that self-interested behavior, their network diminished. And so when funding dried up, they didn't have other income streams. They didn't have other networks that they could reach out to help see them through the crisis. And so they found that the degree of collaboration during a crisis has a huge impact on whether your team, your company, your individuals thrive during that time of a crisis. So as uncomfortable as it feels, as counterintuitive as it is, it's really important to get together and to collaborate during a crisis. And that was one of the things that we also helped teams with during the pandemic. One last video that I want to show you is a quick video by Google. It is about what they found in their project. It was called the Aristotle Project. And let's just have a listen to what their findings were.
Technology companies encourage their employees to work together because studies show that teams tend to innovate faster, achieve higher productivity, see mistakes more quickly, and find better solutions to problems. Yet, not every team is successful. So how do you build a highly effective team that is capable of delivering expected results? A study run by Google will shed some light on this question and help us identify traits that all successful Google teams shared. Several years ago, Google launched an internal project, Aristotle, which was a huge data study focused on the teamwork. The tech giant spent millions of dollars tracking 180 separate teams for 3 years. The goal of the project was simple yet ambitious: to find out what are the traits of the highest performing teams. In other words, the company wanted to know why some teams stumbled while others soared. Initially, the researchers' hypothesis was that maybe best teams had members who liked each other a lot, or there was a healthy mix of personality types, or the team members were friends outside of work. Yet, none of these seemed to matter. The researchers could not find any meaningful patterns in the data. Basically, there was no evidence that a mix of specific personality types, or skills, or backgrounds made any difference. The who part of the equation didn't seem to matter. As the researchers continued to study the groups, they noticed two behaviors that all of the best teams shared. First is that the team members spoke in roughly the same proportion, a phenomenon the researchers call inequality in distribution of conversational turn-taking. On some teams, everyone spoke during each task, while on others, leadership shifted among teammates from assignment to assignment. But in each case, at the end of the day, everyone had spoken roughly the same amount. In other words, as long as everyone got a chance to talk, the team did well. But if only one person or a small group spoke all the time, the collective intelligence declined. Second, the good teams all had high average social sensitivity, a fancy way of saying they were skilled at reading how others felt based on their tone of voice, their expressions, and other nonverbal cues. One of the easiest ways to determine social sensitivity is to show someone photos of a person's eyes and ask to describe what that person is feeling. An exam known as the reading the mind in the eyes. People on successful teams scored about average on this test. They seemed to know when someone was feeling upset or left out. People on less effective teams, in contrast, scored below average. They seemed to be less sensitive towards their colleagues. By the end of the project, researchers came to a conclusion that it didn't matter who was on the team. What mattered was how team members treated each other. Teams where everybody talked and everybody showed respect by listening and paying attention created psychologically safe atmosphere inside the team. And psychological safety of each member in the group had a positive effect on the team's ability to succeed.
Okay, so in closing, we need to have a look at teams in the future. I really hope that shoes in the future don't look like this, but we know that there's great advancements in technology with shoes that lace themselves. We know that there's shoes that will help the blind with little sensors that show them where the obstacles and the dangers are. There's shoes that are linked to Google Maps, shoes that generate electricity. So we know that there will be shoes in the future. We know that there will be teams in the future. We know that with more artificial intelligence, with robotics, with all of those things, they're not going to take over the role of a team. we still need to be, in fact, we need to be even more human in the workplace with all of these changes that are coming. And we need to practice being human. We need to practice our team building. It's not always something that comes naturally. And that's why we do team building, so we can practice to be more human and to work together. I want to leave you with one last little bit of homework or one last little bit of exercise. Just reflect on what we've spoken about today. Was there any one thing that resonated with you? Is there any one thing you heard that might make you think differently? And what is that going to mean for you, for your team, for your company, and for your industry? And that's it, Jane. I can hand over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was so insightful. And you've really given us a lot of food for thought here. I see we do have two questions in one from Gisela. She wants to know, do you think that there are many opportunities for study in the field? She says, it sounds like an obvious question that I'm asking, but I find that existing culture, or we've always done it this way, is the narrative. So, I mean, how do we go about moving that, this is not going to work, yeah.
I think it's an interesting question, Gisela. Thanks for asking that. I think that teams are always going to be around as long as we have a workplace. And remember, the workplace isn't your only team. So, you know, your book club can be your team. Your family can be your team. So we're always going to need help with how to be better, how to be more effective, how to hurt each other less or create less of a toxic environment. And often what happens with this resistance that you're talking about, this is the way we do things, like it or lump it. It's normally fear. It's a lot of those underlying emotions that would motivate that type of thinking. And a coach or someone, a team coach that can come in and point out that behavior and can show teams how to behave instead, I think is something that's going to be very important. And I think it would be a very good area to study or a very good area to build your experience in. We do work as industrial psychologists, we do work at individual, team and organizational level, but you don't need to be a psychologist to understand team dynamics and to walk it or coach a team, just like you'd coach a soccer team. You know, the players, they're brilliant, they're so talented, but they don't just get on the field and play. They need a coach that helps them. There's no shame in having a coach. There's no shame in team building, in practicing being a team.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very good point. I like that. Because we kind of feel that we should know everything. We should be able to do it by ourselves. And so I like that. Then we've got a question from Lee here. Lee wants to know, in your opinion, do you think that we as South Africans exist in the state of anxiety almost constantly, given our unique stresses like unemployment and gender-based violence and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think everyone in the world has been traumatized at the same time with the pandemic. I think that we as South Africans, we've had a lot of that anxiety and that stress anyway. So it's just more that has been added onto us. There are so many economic and social issues that we need to deal with. And those are also not going to go away anytime soon. And that's why resilience is so important. But really, one of the things that the pandemic has done is help to not level the playing field, because we all experienced the pandemic differently, but everyone was traumatized at the same time. Everyone has a brain, and everyone's brains went into that amygdala hijack. And the question is, how do we learn to get out of that hijack, whether we're sitting in South Africa or whether we're sitting in Vietnam or New Zealand or America?
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. And yeah, I mean, as we go on in South Africa, I think we do have those tensions that perhaps some countries don't have, but as you said, you know, that this was just unforeseen. So I really think this was a valuable session. You've raised some good questions, and that I'm going to also ask my team what I'm just thinking about, and as we sit here is looking at, and I know it's a simple thing, but to articulate and to actually know and name the emotion that you're feeling. I think that is very important for us, because we don't, as you said, we know the, you know, sad, glad, mad, that those ones. And so language plays quite an important part in in how we see our world and the limits of our world or not. So that for me is one of the things that I'm going to be reflecting on. And what I do really fancy is the shoes that generate electricity. So I'm going to be looking out for those. Being a bit of a fanatic, I really think I'm going to be doing that. But thank you so much, Michelle. It was very interesting, insightful, and I think we've got so much value out of this. And I'd like to also thank all our, what do I call, our audience, our participants. Thank you for being here, for spending time with us. If you do have any further questions for Michelle, please feel free to reach out to us so that we could put you in contact with Michelle, or find ways that you can get whatever questions you have answered. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate it once again. And to everybody, have a wonderful time, wonderful day today, and we'll see you in the next webinar. All the best.
Thank you so much.